What's up guys, John here and welcome back to John Moon Studios. In today's video, we're going to continue talking about the brand new Cubase 12 update, and we're going to dive into the brand new feature called Audio to MIDI Chords. Let's get right to it. Alright, so here I have the project window set up, and I have 3 examples to play for you to see how well Cubase transfers these audio clips into chords that you can read on the chord track. So on top here, I've created a chord track. If you have not created it or don't know how to, you can either hit the plus sign here and then find in the more section the chord track, which is right here. You can right click on an empty space and find the chord track right over here. So in this case, I put a piano track here to be the source of the sound for the chord track. So all you need to do is pull up a MIDI instrument, and then once you pull it up, you're going to click on this empty space here, which is going to say use monitor tracks if you haven't routed it as source yet. And then you're going to choose the piano track, piano chord track, or whatever it is that you called it. So now all you need to do to make these audio events turn into chord tracks is you're going to drag the audio file into the chord track. So the first example we're going to look at is going to be a score demo I did. This is a bit more jazzy, so we're going to see how this chord track reads it and how it holds up to the new feature. So let's go ahead and drag this onto the chord track, and it's only going to take a couple seconds. The moment I release, it's going to take a couple seconds, and then it populates the chords. So these are the chords that I use in the song, and we're going to see how accurate the chords are to the song. So what we're going to do is we're going to mute first the piano track, and we're going to listen to a little bit of the track itself. And then I'm going to go ahead and allow the piano track to play along with the audio track. Now, some of these chords might not be like perfectly in time, but that's okay as long as we get a good read on what the chords are. So let's go ahead and see what the track sounds like first. All right, so we're going to stop there. So as you can hear, it's a loop of chords. So we have E major, C major 7. Then it says it goes back to E major, C major 7, E minor, C major 7, and D major. So let's go ahead and unsolo the... So now let's go ahead and solo the piano chord track in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to highlight all of these, and I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard so that they can quantize onto the beats a little bit, and let's just go ahead and see what it sounds like when we play it together. All right, so you heard it yourself. It was pretty darn close to the original audio. The only chord that was a little off was this E minor chord. It's supposed to be an E major chord. And the second chord and the third chord have tensions on it. So this is supposed to be an E major 7. And then this one's supposed to be another E major 7. But for the most part, you saw that Cubase did a very good job in laying these chords out for you, and this would be great if you need to revise a song or you wrote a song. Like for instance, in this case, I wrote these scores about 3 or 4 years ago. So now I can go back, just plug it in here and have an idea of what chords I used in the song. So this is a great way to use this audio to MIDI chords new feature that Cubase 12 has. So now what happens if the chord that we played wasn't the chord we were looking for? So the cool thing is that if you double click on a chord, you're going to see that this window pops up. Now, it might pop up in the editor section. We're just going to go into the Chord Assistant section. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this checkbox off for a second. And now here are a list of chords in the order that Cubase says could be or possibly be the right chord. Now, in this case, it said this chord was an E minor. Now, it could have been clashing with the melody here, which was an E flat for that trumpet melody, which could have confused Cubase and made it seem as though it was an E minor chord here, but technically it is an E major chord. So little nuances like that can shift the chords here and there, but for the most part, here we have a list of suggestions starting from top to bottom. This is what Cubase says could possibly be the chord. If it's green, there's a high probability it can be. If it's yellow, it's sort of in the middle. And if it's red, it's kind of just throwing these chords out here because they might have similar tensions or similarity in sound of some kind. Now, this bottom section here called Highlight Suggested from the List tab. So this one, we're going to talk about it when we go into the piano demo because I'm going to show you what this bottom section does too. And this all goes hand in hand with what I'm going to explain when we go down here to the piano demo. But for example, if let's say this is the chord and we say, no, we wanted it to be, let's say an E minor 7, then we can click on it. And as you can see, the chord will change on top. That way you can choose the correct chord depending on functionality. We're going to get a little bit theoretical here, but it depends on functionality or, you know, with the kind of tensions that you have, you're going to want to correct the chords down here. So for example, this one was not an E minor chord at all, actually. I'm going to go into the editor and just put a major 7, and I'm going to hit the J7 for major 7. And this is the chord that we wanted for this part. Now, instead of you going out and clicking on the next chord like this, what you do is to move around the chords, you're going to hit these arrows here. So I'm going to go to this chord here. And now this chord was correct, except it did not have a tension. But check it out. Cubase said, I thought I heard an E, but my second suggestion is an E major 7. So this one was actually correct. So I'm going to go ahead and click E major 7 for that one. This is the chord that was used in this part of the song. So now I'm going to go back into the music and we're going to see what the score sounds like with these correct chords in there. So I'm going to play it up to about measure 13 and let's see how it goes. All right, so you see that now we've corrected both of these chords, and it's the chord that is used inside of the score. So you can see how accurate this can actually get when you're using audio to MIDI chords. So now let's go ahead and scratch this one and go into the second example. So the second example is another score of mine that I did a couple years ago. It's just going to take a few seconds for the chords to populate, and you're going to see that it's just a repetition of chords. But again, I chose this to show you how accurate this can get. Of course, with more complex music, it can be a little bit more of refining that you need to do after the fact. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate. So we're going to go ahead and listen to this track right now with the piano track soloed so we get an idea of what this track sounds like. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and solo the piano chord track so that it could play along with this track. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit so that we can hear if the chords are accurate or not. So here we're going to start from the beginning. All right, so we can hear that the chords are pretty accurate. Now, of course, I know this track because I wrote it. So I know that this chord here actually has a bass note that is not included in the chord chart here. But if we listen to the bass movement in the track itself, we hear that it goes from E flat. So let me just go ahead and play this really quick on the piano. So it's going to go E flat, and then it's going to go down to D because of the voice leading. And then it's going to go down to C, and then it's going to go back up to D. That's the voice leading that I'm using here. So the chord, the second chord should actually be so it's going to be E flat major to B flat over D. So it's going to sound like this. And then we have the C minor 7. Back to the B flat over D. Now the reason why this has to be very specific is because if I play the bass note, if I don't put a D in the bass note of this B flat chord, it's going to sound like this. You hear this motion? And that's not the motion I was going for. I wanted it to go smoothly down to D. So that gives it an overall different color. So what I can do is I can go into the chord itself. Here it says, well, this is what we thought it was. These are the suggestions it could be, but it did not add the bass notes. So I see that the Chord Assistant, when it comes to slash chords or chords with inversions, it doesn't really give you the inversion here, but it does give you the chord itself. So it is a B flat chord, B flat major chord. But I can easily go into the editor and then just say that D is going to be on the bass. And now here you can see the difference with this. So if I solo just the chord track here, now it starts to sound like the score itself. And then if I go into the score now and I play those first two chords, there we have that B flat over D sound. So as you can see, the song kind of repeats itself over and over and over again, but we have a general idea of what these chords are. Again, if I forgot or I need to revisit any of these scores, this is a great way to just kind of see overall what chords I played in the track. And it does a fairly good job at reading it, even in more complex parts. So if I go ahead and go into measure 35, where the song kind of crescendos into another melody, and then we have more instruments coming in, it still knows that the chord progression is the same. So let's just take a listen to this. Right, so you saw that it still was able to analyze these chords within the context of all of these different instruments playing at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the final example, where I'm going to show you what this little bottom section does in the Chord Assistant. So I'm going to go ahead and move this piano demo all the way up here. And here I wrote a little something on the piano. So let's hear what it sounds like the original. So here it is. Okay, so that is the small little chord progression I wrote to see if Cubase can analyze this and tell me what's going on. Now, the reason why I designed it this way is because I wanted to purposely put a cadence at the end. So this is a 4-5-1 cadence. So let's go into the Chord Assistant and let's see what's going on here. So for this piano demo, obviously I use the audio, not the MIDI, because if I put the MIDI up here, then it's going to have the correct chords because it's reading it off of MIDI. But I put the audio, and notice how these are the chords that it populated for me. So if I actually play the track with the demo itself, So here it missed a chord. I have a chord between B flat and A flat, and that's a G minor chord that I was playing there. So it did miss that, but it also said that this was a B flat 6. It wasn't actually a B flat 6, it was just a regular B flat major chord. So it analyzed it as a 6th chord, but again, that's super easy. We could just go in and see what else it suggested. So it said, well, my second suggestion was the B flat chord. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch that for the Chord Assistant. And then there we have our C minor, B flat, and A flat. And I kept it simple. These are just triads. So there's only 3 notes. There are no tensions. So there's no 7ths, 9ths, or 13ths in this piano demo. And now we're going to go ahead and move to the next chord, which is A flat. So it says this was A flat, F minor, G major, and then we have a C minor here at the end. So now we're going to talk about the bottom section, but we're going to look at this 5 chord first. Now, if we press highlight suggestions from list tab, here we have a complexity meter. So what this is if I raise it up to 7, it's going to say that for this chord, if you want the chords to be as complex as possible, this is the level that you're going to be at, number 7. And these are the chord possibilities from this complexity filter. If I keep going down, you're going to see that maybe in this chord choice, there will be different complexity filters. But notice how now I went down to 1 and none of them are on, because it's saying that this chord is somewhere around a complexity level of 2. So it enabled the G and the G minor chord. If I go down to 1, it just says that maybe it's none of these chords because the chord isn't that simple. And it also depends on what it is of the chord in context. Now the button to the right of it is called the gap mode. Now this also plays a role in the complexity filter because this will determine the chord depending on what comes before and after it. So for example, Cubase algorithm says the chord before is an F minor and the chord after is a C minor. If I click this again, it's going to now add the G major to the complexity filter number 1. And the reason is that it's only basing itself off of the previous chord. So it's saying because the previous chord is F minor, then the next chord should be a G, because it's saying that this is probably in the key of C. It's analyzing it that way. So if I do the next one, the reason why it does not give me a filter in 1 is because C minor, technically G major goes to C major. I'm going G major to C minor. So that is already a change in what would be the traditional way of music theory. So that right there is what allows it for it to appear in the complexity number 1. Now, again, that might be a little bit too heavy in the music theory side, but that is really what's going on under the algorithm of the Chord Assistant. Now, the bottom section here is what we call the cadence, and then we have common notes. So a cadence in music is this right here. So if we put type, we're going to see that we have a 1-4-5-1. So if I play it on the piano, it's going to sound like this. So that is the full cadence. If I do a half cadence, it's just going to be 1 chord to the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Next, it goes to the Plago cadence, which is a 1-4-1. So here's the 1-4-1. And then next we have the blues cadence, which is just a 1, 5, 4. Now, of course, as I'm playing this, you're going to see the chords changing up here, but we'll go ahead and just move it back to a G chord. And so that is what cadence are inside of music. So what's going on here is that you could set the algorithm to either a cadence or a common note. And the common note is just saying that because of the previous chord being F minor, and we want to keep, let's say, some common notes, then the suggestion for Cubase is that the G7 is going to be the correct chord, because a G7 has a common note with F minor, which is the F. A G dominant chord is G, B, D, and F. So that's a common note in here. Now the G sus4 again has a common note with F because C is the sus4. The 4 of G is C. So the common note between the previous chord and this chord is a G sus4. If we say that the chord is going to be determined by the previous and the chord that's in front of it, it's still going to be kept the same because the next chord is C. So we have a C in the sus4, and the previous chord has an F, which has an F in the previous chord. So you can see how you can play around this to really nail down what chord you're looking for in this. So we're going to go back into Cadence, and we're going to say, well, this is a full cadence. So if we're in full cadence, that means I followed the rule and I said it's a 1, 4, 5, 1. So here we have a 4, 5, and then 1. These are the possible scenarios you're going to have with this. Looking in both directions, previous and the chord right after. If I do a half cadence, then if I look at the previous and after, this isn't a half cadence because before the 5 chord, there is a 4 chord, not a 1 chord. So now Cubase does not suggest that. If I just look at the previous chord, it's still not going to suggest it because it's saying, well, this is a 4 chord. I need to go to a 1 chord to 5, not 4 to 5. So it's not a half cadence. So in this case, if you don't know how to use this or filter it out, just leave it in all cadence, leave this in cadence mode, and don't even have this box highlighted. If you're not into music theory or you don't understand what cadence are, just leave this unhighlighted and then choose the chord from here. If the chord you're looking for is not here, you can always go back into the editor and then fill out the chord information yourself. So again, if you don't understand how to use the chord editor, I did a previous video on Cubase 11 showing you how to use the chord editor, the basics to the chord editor. I'm going to link it right now in the top right corner of this video. But essentially here you choose the chord you want, you choose the quality of the chord, you choose your tensions, and you choose your bass note. So for example, if I wanted this to be a G major 7 with D in the bass, I can do that there. But in this case, it's just a G major chord. So I'm going to leave G as the bass note and I'm going to remove the tension here. So that is pretty much it for the brand new feature inside of Cubase called the Audio to MIDI Chords. This is a great way for you to revisit previous music that you've done and just figure out what chords you use for that track in case you want to do any revisions or you're going to re-release the music or whatever the case may be. This is a great tool for you to do it without breaking your head and doing it all by ear. Cubase can do that for you. If you have any questions, just go ahead and drop your comments down below and I'll get to them as soon as possible. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the ring button so you don't miss any of my weekly videos. Also, don't forget to visit the John Moon Studios website. You can stay up to date with everything happening in John Moon Studios in the blog section. So make sure to go check that out. Don't forget to share with your musician friends. I will see you guys soon.